In this video, we'll be solving an equation that contains a radical. Our problem that we'll be doing is to solve for x, and the equation is x minus the square root of 4x plus 12 is equal to 0. Now what I'll do is I'll show the step that we'll be taking over here on the left, and then I'll actually do the step on the right here in this space. So our first step is to isolate the radical on one side of the equation. If there's more than one radical, isolate one of them. So since we only have the one radical, I'm going to move this radical to the right side of the equation by adding the square root of 4x plus 12 to both sides of the equation. So I now have x is equal to the square root of 4x plus 12. Our next step is to raise both sides of the equation to a power that's the same as the index on the radical. This will eliminate the radical. Now when we have a square root, we don't have an index shown, but it's so common that the index is 2 and we don't show that. But you can assume that if there's no index shown that it is 2. So I want to raise both sides of my equation to the second power. When I do that, on the left side I have x squared, and on the right side the squaring and the square rooting are inverse operations, so I'll just have 4x plus 12. My next step, if the equation still contains a radical, repeat steps 1 and 2, so that step is not applicable in this case because our equation doesn't have any radicals in it. So our next step then is to solve the resulting equation. Now in order to solve this is a quadratic, so we can either use quadratic formula, completing the square, or factoring. I'm going to move everything to the left side and look at this to see if it'll factor, since that's a fast way to solve it. So x squared, when I move the 4x to the left, it becomes a negative 4x. And then when I move the 12 to the left, it'll be negative 12. And then equals 0. Now to solve this by factoring, I'll still have that product then equal to 0. I need two terms here in the front parts of the binomials that when multiplied give me x squared, so that'll be x and x. And then I need two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 12, and then add together to give me negative 4. And I think that those would be 6 and 2, and my 6 has to be negative, so the bigger one is negative. So I'll have a negative 6 and a positive 2. Now before I go on, I always check to make sure that I have it factored correctly. So I FOIL this out. X times x is x squared, and that's what I need in the front there. My outer product is a positive 2x. My inner product is a negative 6x. When I add those together, I get negative 4x. So good to go there. And then when I multiply negative 6 times positive 2, I get negative 12. So this is factored correctly. Now once you have two factors multiplied together to equal 0, you can use the zero factor property and set each of these equal to 0. So x minus 6 equals 0, and then this one is x plus 2 equals 0. I'll solve those for x by adding 6 to both sides here. These will cancel, and I get x is equal to 6. That's 6. And then subtract 2 from both sides for this equation. These will cancel, and I get x is equal to negative 2. Now you can't stop at this point because you always check when you have a step where you're raising both sides to a power that may possibly generate extra solutions. So I need to check my solutions in this original equation. So let me do that. My original equation was x minus square root of 4x plus 12, and that was equal to 0. So let's check the 6 first. 6 minus square root of 4 times 6 plus 12. And I want to know if that's a question mark, I want to know if that is equal to 0. I have 6 minus 4 times 6 is 24, plus 12 is 36. So square root of 36. So this is 6 minus, and then the square root of 36 is 6. So 6 minus 6 is 0, and that is indeed equal to 0. So 6 is one of my solutions. Now I'll check a negative 2. So I'm going to put that back into this original equation. So I have negative 2 subtract square root of 4 times negative 2 plus 12. I want to know if that is equal to 0. So I have negative 2 subtract 4 times negative 2 is negative 8 plus 12. Copy to negative 2 subtract negative 8 plus 12 is 4. So I have negative 2 subtract square root of 4 is 2. Now this is equal to negative 4, and that is not equal to 0 on the right side here. So x equal negative 2 is not one of my solutions. X equals 6 is the only solution that I can give.